After a couple of weeks of why does my spec suck, we finally have buffs announced for a bunch of the underperforming specs and hero talents as well, as the first round of tuning happens in Season 3. We're gonna start it right off without further ado with Blood Death Knight. All damage has been increased by 6%, and Bone Shield armor increased by 10%. Blood has been, over the years, notoriously bad and has been known as the tank that kind of falls flat first, which is saying quite a bit considering some of the tanks are squishier than a DPS player. Now, this might not make Blood Decay meta, but it will definitely raise the floor or the ceiling or whatever you want to call it to how high the spec can actually clear content. And we're talking about mostly Mythic Plus, since in raids, Blood Decay is always really good. Most, if not all, of the tank busters are tuned around some of the weaker tanks, and the tanks are basically tuned to survive those tank busters. Of course, some tanks do it better, but Blood Decay can still do it properly, and the real concern is always with Mythic Plus, because that usually scales higher than Mythic Raid in terms of like the tank damage that you end up taking. I don't think Blood will ever be meta until it's completely redesigned to match the current content, because the Blood kit, in terms of how it's doing its active mitigation and self-sustain, was not made to account for Mythic Plus and endlessly scaling content. Moving forward to Balanced Druid. Oh my god, can you believe Balanced Druid have been bad for half a season? And by bad, I mean about A tier and not S tier. Well, if you don't, then that's fine, because Balanced Druid probably complained enough to get a couple of buffs. All damage has been increased by 5%. Great to see. Now, the 2 set piece Starfire damage has also been increased by 15%, previously was 20%, so probably to adjust for some of this. And Elun's Chosen Boundless Moonlight's Fury of Elun flash damage has been reduced by 10%, and Elun's Chosen Minor Moon damage has been reduced by 10%. So this is probably just to balance out the hero talents from what I understand, because the baseline damage has been increased, which is probably still a buff, but the tier sets and the hero talents in question have been kind of taken down a little bit. So maybe things haven't actually changed at all for balance, but hey, it's still doing really good. It could use a little bit more single target, but I think that's balance's issue since forever. Moving to Evoker. Augmentation for the Scalecommander. Bombardment's damage has been increased by 25%. Similar to before, I'm not sure if this will put Augmentation back on the map. Currently, it's one of the most underperforming specs in possibly raids, based off of the latest analysis that we've done. However, it is on a track of constantly getting more and more damage into its kit and shifting away from the support role to maybe more of a DPS role. Devastation. Deep Breath damage increased by 20%. And Command Squadron for the Scalecommander 2-piece tier set, Disintegrate damage increased by 10%. Now, I'm not fairly up to date with what Devastation is doing. I just know that in raids, Devastation is, oh my god, crazy. Obviously, it's been used in the race world first. So seeing it buffed is a little bit confusing, but it's probably because Flame Shaper has been mostly used in raids, to my knowledge. So buffing Scalecommander is just probably making these be more in tune with each other. This is overall great, because what we're seeing right now, and with the balance rules changes, is that they're not nerfing the top performer specs, but actually buffing the underperforming specs. I don't know if this is going to address all of the underperforming specs, because there's quite a few, but one step at a time, I suppose, and hopefully we see more in the next couple of days/weeks. Preservation has also had Deep Breath damage increased by 20%. Beast Mastery has had all damage increased by 4%, since it's been trailing off a little bit lately. And Death Blow updated. Once again, Kill Command's chance to grant Death Blow to Beast Mastery Hunter has been increased to 20%, previously was 10%. And this will affect Dark Ranger only, since as far as I know, in Pack Leader, you hardly ever press Kill Shot, if not at all, since it just doesn't really do that much damage, and having more procs of it doesn't really change anything. The funny thing about this is that I feel like on the PTR, it was about 20%, then it was nerfed to 15 and then to 10, if I recall correctly, because Dark Ranger Beastmaster was just out of its world, and it just was over nerfed, because we're seeing a lot of Dark Ranger buffs. The Bell Toll damage bonus has been increased to 10%, previously was 6%, that's quite an increase. Phantom Pain damage share increased to 45%, previously was 30%. I remember this also been nerfed on the PTR. And Bleak Powder damage increased by 25%, also something that has been nerfed on the PTR, also something that we're seeing buffed once again. It's a little bit sad that it's taken this long to get Dark Ranger back up and rolling. Well, based off of how the feedback went on the PTR, it's probably because they're a little bit behind with class tuning, or maybe they have these scheduled ahead of time and now we're just seeing them hit live servers, or obviously, you know, the live servers will be hit with this on the reset next week, depending on when you see this video. For Monk, only Mistweaver has a change with Master of Harmony, fixed an issue that caused Ancient Teachings healing to not be increased by Coalescence. So overall, a slight buff. I'm not sure if Master of Harmony is the predominant use of Mistweaver or used at all, but either way, the bugs for classes in this expansion has been pretty atrocious, and seeing them fixed is just, it's probably better than class tuning at some point. Moving down to Priest, for Holy, healing increased by 12%, Halo healing increased by 40%, and for Archon, Empowered Surges increases the healing done by flash heals affected by Surge of Light by 45%, previously was 30%. As far as these changes are concerned, I believe in Mythic Plus, Oracle is almost 100% played with almost no Archon inside, and Archon is seeing some play in Mythic Mana Forge, and everything about that this is doing is probably propping Archon, well, not probably, definitely propping Archon a little bit higher. Then again, we don't really know if this is going to be enough. Not at this point. We'll have to see when healers are able to test this in actual content and decide if it's actually good or not. I think the quality of life of Oracle being able to give you big absorb shields on top of everything else is gonna be hard to be replaced with pure throughput from Archon, especially in a world where, at least in Mythic Plus, the damage taken is so incredibly bursty for healing that preemptive healing or proactive healing is definitely preferred over reactive healing. So no matter how much burst you have, if you don't have time to cast that burst and somebody dies, it's kind of pointless in the end. Discipline, Atonement heals for 33% of the damage done. Previously was 28, so buff the Discipline, and Atonement healing is increased by 100% outside of Raid, was 125%, and this is a nerf for Mythic Plus. So it's very likely that Atonement Raid healing was just overall increased so that Discipline can be more competitive in raids, since we know that it's been pretty good in dungeons. Now, Discipline is not meta this season as it was last season, not by a long shot. That spot has been taken away, but it's good to see that the tuning knobs are there in a place where they can actually manage these a little bit better for Mythic Plus and Raid, to not buff spec in one area of content that will make it broken in the other area of content. This has been a struggle keeping the specs balanced in tune for the longest time. Overall, I have one thing to say about today's tuning, because I would have expected a bunch of other stuff to happen. Probably the same with everybody. We would have expected Frost Death Knight, Arcane Mage, maybe even Havoc Demon Hunter to be nerfed, and then a lot of other specs like Survival Hunter, possibly Windwalker, Arms Warrior to be buffed and put a little bit more on the map at this point. If this is just an example of underperforming specs being buffed and we're not really touching the top specs, this is actually a great thing to do, and I hope that we see more of this in the future, because we are still waiting for a promise that Ian has made to us back in Battle for Azeroth, or maybe it was Legion, where he said specifically that they would prefer to buff specs, underperforming specs of course, than to nerf overperforming specs as well. This is the last patch of the expansion, and I would love for people to not feel like their spec is being weakened as they progress through the content, either pushing the raid or pushing Mythic Plus score as we're getting ready for midnight. I think WoW is due to a change in pace and the opinion of the community in how these specs are treated, and playing a spec, enjoying it, and only fearing that one day, 1 week, you'll be weaker than the rest of the weeks, that just doesn't feel great for anybody. Obviously, if you have broken specs, it should probably be tuned. But as someone who has played a broken spec and had it nerfed for good reasons, I'm not gonna say anything here. It still feels like ass to log in one day and know, oh, this week I'm just weaker. Doesn't matter how much effort I put into the spec last week and how much gear I farmed and how much I practiced my rotation, I'm just weaker. That just doesn't feel great for anybody. In an ideal world, we would never have that, but it's great to see that they're propping the base underperformance a little bit higher, but we are still missing a bunch of specs, so likely we're gonna have another one of these videos as we're getting these other specs tuned as well. And if you're not really convinced that there's kind of a discrepancy between the meta, but still, at the end of the day, it's still fine, you can watch our latest tier list on Mythic Plus that we just posted out yesterday or the day before, depending on when you watch this one, to kind of show you where the specs are at this point, even if they're underperforming.